got taken over by McCulloch, I don't know, because I was a doctor and I don't really know. But I do know that, for example, when I no longer had my year with Warren, then he more or less organized things for me that I didn't understand that he was doing. So then I got money from Peter.
Yes.
I'm quite sure Warren had to do with. That is important. And
but this is not an obvious connection. How would somebody like McCulloch know somebody like Peter Ozer? Have you thought about it? I mean, they live in two different. What is their social overlap in terms of?
Well, I know that Peter somehow was related to Warren, but there's no obvious connection. But for example, when
You don't think it was through Papert, who lived in? You don't think it was through Papert, who lived in Switzerland?
through
Papert. The Minsky's colleague, Stuart Papert, or whatever his name is.
It's just the pronunciation,
Papert.
I
spell it.
No. Well, the guy who was working with Minsky.
Papert, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Because Ozer lived in Switzerland, right?
Yeah, right. Papert never mentioned, or was there any connection that I knew of between the two? But how come suddenly all this money showed up, and this that Peter Oser somehow chose this as a project of his. I am certain that there was a connection somewhere from Warren to him. It could have been. It could have been through Papert.
Yes.
I have no idea. I was sort of playing around at one point with the man who was doing programming animals. It was in Switzerland.
In Switzerland?
As I recall, yeah.
Okay. It's not. Let me find the name.
There's a very famous.
In Zurich, at the zoo, there was a zoo in Zurich where there was a guy there who was doing a lot of experiments with animals, who was also very close to Edward Hall.
That's my friend Edward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did you get in touch with this person doing animals in Switzerland? What was the connection?
Well, it was mostly that he seemed to be doing unique work. Understanding the behavior of animals.
His name by any chance was not Heidegger, not the philosopher, but...
No.
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 But we're not talking about Piaget, we're not talking about psychologist who was very close to Papert.
Yeah, that's true.
So there was a guy called Heini Heidegger.
No.
But have you heard of him, though?
Heidegger?
Heidegger. It's do you see? And it's spelled like this. Henry Heidegger.
No.
So he was very close to Edward Hall. This is from whom Edward Hall got the idea that kind of behavior is culturally determined and specified. By looking also at how close animals were to each other, he started looking at how people.
Yeah, well, he was. Hall was involved with how animals disposed of space,
Yes. Well,
and then got involved with how humans disposed of space, and quite. I was high on something or another. And I was stoned. I went to the stone hotel, or bridge or something, anyway. Stone Inn, I guess it was. And I looked down at these people moving, and it was fantastic because I suddenly see that there is a rhythm among all the people in this place, which I'd never imagined at all. It suddenly didn't occur to me. But there they were all following a rhythm in this whole room, where people I had no concept that they could be following a rhythm together. It was quite strange. And I don't think it was because I'd taken some LSD. And it was just, it was revealed to me by the fact that I'd taken away the spotting, we say in Norwegian, it's taken away the bars that you don't understand.
Yes.
Things that you don't see because they don't exist. And suddenly I see this existence of all the people moving together, and you know, my family work was the same thing, in a sense, because suddenly in the family you see this
Structures.
the fact that there are certain things happening that nobody is aware of. That there are rhythms and biological activities that are outside consciousness because we haven't approached the point where these things can be conscious. The whole business of time is more or less omitted. Timing.
I don't
So suddenly, you know, you worked with the families, you saw that there was a timing that was going on that was quite outside their imagination and most people's imagination.
But I don't remember if I asked you this. Did you have any relationship with the founder of system theory, Ludwig von Bertalanffy?
Von
Von Bertalanffy, yeah, Hungarian name, but you spent
it's
some
von
time in Canada.
Bertalanffy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I disagreed with him completely.
But you met him.
I didn't meet him, but I read a lot.
Uh-huh.
I was involved with him, but he was more involved with, the word comes, conditioning.
That was Skinner.
Skinner, yeah, I know. But Bertalanffy, he was a prominent figure at that time.
Yes.
And I felt that what he thought was wrong. And so I, you know, this was one of the potential avenues of going. But I felt that there's something wrong with this, completely wrong. And I think it didn't really respect the human way.
Yes.
They were making humans into machines.
Well, he proved to be a Nazi in the end. He spent a lot of time collaborating with the Nazis, but that emerged only in the last 10 or 15 years. So when he was in Vienna, he had a really dark past. So,
So this man was somebody I didn't want to deal with at all, because I didn't like him.
Yes.
That's to put it more bluntly. and you know, it was one of the potentials, but no. This
But you're
is,
sure that you're not talking about him and not about Skinner? Because when you said
no,
conditioning,
no, Skinner. I know Skinner.
yeah. But
Well-
because I don't think he did anything about conditioning, Bertrand Laffy. So.
No, but okay, but Skinner and his
yeah,
conditioning.
Skinner we discussed. Yes.
Anyway,
Uh-huh.
okay, we discussed it, and I don't need to discuss it again. And Bertalanffy was someone I disagreed with. There was something wrong with this way of thinking. So I don't remember exactly what.
Yeah. No, but it's good. It's good reference.
Yeah, and
But coming back to Peter Oser, do you know of any other projects he had funded similar
Yeah.
to yours?
I know he funded one project in Africa, which was to take teak wood and move it into river to the ocean,
Yes.
where it would be picked up by whatever commercial interests. And he didn't realize that the teak wood was so dense that when it also absorbed water, it would sink. So that was a big loss to him. I don't think it was a loss financially because he didn't give a damn. But I know Peter had a wife in Polynesia that he more or less kept quiet. So he had other people, other women.
But I also read at some point that I don't remember correctly now, but he was married to somebody in the. Was he your age approximately, or was he your age or older, Peter Oser?
He'd be about my age.
I think he was married to somebody in 1930s, 20s who had some kind of a fascination with Satanism, and Aleister Crowley and that entire crew. Is that possible?
It doesn't sound like him.
Doesn't sound like him.
No, no, not at all. But at the same time, he had his projects. And as I told you, he wanted to make me a project.
Yes.
And I didn't want to be a project.
But what drove him? Was it primarily, I mean, it could not be financial
No,
gain.
not at all.
So he just was bored to death and he wanted to have fun, or?
No, I think he really, some things interested him. And he was quite interested that we have the right milieu
Yes.
to make it all work. And helping to, the lab was a beautiful place.
Yes.
As beautiful as we could make it since we weren't artists. And, he insisted on this, making the things being colorful, things being, having this lovely disc that's
Yes.
hung on from the ceiling. And he wanted a geometric dome. I don't like Bucky Fuller. And it seemed all too static for me. And he wanted a car in the second room, without the engine. And all colored in, I guess what was called modern in those days.
Yes.
And he loved to have his own touch.
Yes. But what do you think would count as success if in your particular case? So if he didn't have a conflict with Avery, if he didn't have some conflict with you, what would be the successful path of that lab, that it would turn into what?
The path of success.
Hmm.
It would have, well, when I came to Norway after a while, I started bionics. First I started biomachine.
No, for you, I know what would have been successful. What would be successful, Peter Ozer, given, he invested some money, he gave you some time to spend it, so then the project got discontinued, right? You did not continue with it, but what would have counted as success that would allow the project to develop, him invest more money? It would not be commercial viability of the project, I assume?
No, I think
It would be just it continuing to fascinate him and not bore him, or what would be the...
I think most of all he would have liked it to be creative in a way that was beautiful. And in a way that I think that he could say that he had been responsible for its beauty.
Yes.
And these things that had happened. And this development, this artistic development. And I, as a member of this, the whole thing could move to some place where he could invest more money.
Yes.
And make something very meaningful out of it. I think that would have pleased him.
But did he have an opinion about your efforts to somehow, I don't want to say commercialize, but you did have meetings, as we saw in the film, with this furniture company and the disco club.
Yeah.
I mean, was he approving of those efforts, or did he think they were a distraction?
No. Not their destruction. No. Somehow he wanted us to continue moving along on this path in a way that was creating something more permanent, because he liked the idea, and he liked this feeling of something is happening. He's made something happen. I expect it's important to him. And when Avery threw a glass of wine in his face, that was not the outcome that he wanted. And Avery, I think, while the lab was going, he was building a house too.
At the quarry?
No. We're talking about he was building a house in the city,
in Boston.
And a very fine house, modern house, which he had this concert on, which was shown in the film.
Yes.
And he didn't have I think somehow or another he wasn't too involved with all of that. He would have been happy if I went with him to Switzerland and became somehow a philosopher.
But it was Ozer who was building the house, or Avery. Ozer was building it. Avery.
Yeah, we're going back to
Yeah.
So these are two rich guys.
Yes.
And I can't say much more about it than that.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were competing particularly. I just think Avery was a temperamental guy and lost his cool.
Do you remember if Negroponte ever visited you at the lab or the quandary? Has he ever been to that space?
I think I must have talked with him, that he was quite young at that time. He just got out of school, out of
Yes.
university.
Yes.
I liked him and he liked me, and
Mm-hmm.
I admired his creativity as a student. He was, and his early work was quite fascinating
Mm-hmm.
because he was investigating the intelligence of animals, and particularly of such creatures as
Sure.
slimes, things like that, who had so much intelligence, and he worked with mice and other things. And
Jabrils.
Hmm?
Jabrils.
Jabrils,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he had a deeper insight than most people.
Yes. But the reason I'm asking is you don't think that what became the MIT Media Lab was somehow inspired by what he might have seen at the college, at the lab in Boston?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But how much he was conscious of it, or not, I don't know.
But time-wise, you think it would have been possible for him to... I mean, we don't know if he visited, but it would have been possible. You already had a relationship with him as you were running the lab, so he might have stopped by to say
Yeah,
hi.
I think, it's you plant seeds. And the seed was planted, and I really felt very deeply that that the lab as a seed was absolutely a part of moving the Media Lab. There may have been many other seeds too. I'm sure I was one of them. Because he himself had, talked about me in this one lecture that we talked about where I was a guest.
Yes. In Helsinki.
Yeah, which I was pleased because otherwise he'd more or less ignored me. Not consciously, but just, there's other things, more fish to fry. So I don't feel that. I felt a little hurt that nothing really developed further, but and here the whole lab had, his project at MIT was quite definitely related to what I was doing, but from a more general point of view. But as I say, there's many other people he related to as well. He was young and up and going and had a lot of money. And that's what's necessary. And a lot of creativity inside of him, which he expressed in his Media Lab. So it's fine. But you can't pay attention to all your mentors. As he said, I was one of his mentors. So I'm happy with that.
Do you remember when you published a couple of articles in Radical Software?
Absolutely.
No, I know, but do you remember any feedback that came at the time from other readers, or did those articles make any impact on the public, or or you weren't paying attention to the feedback even if it came?
Well, I wasn't paying attention to the feedback, and
well, did you hear back from anybody who's read them?
No. No, I don't think so. And Radical Software was a very limited publication for people who were into it. Didn't have any broad publication. Not that I knew, anyway. Among artists, maybe. But the whole group. Have you talked with? Wait a minute. My friend who's just come back from Australia.
Oh yes, Friedman.
Yeah, Ken.
Yeah.
He would have more idea about that.
Mm-hmm. But he was part of Fluxus, though, not
Yeah.
of the. Ken Friedman, yeah.
Yeah. So he would have some
Uh-huh.
feedback.
How did you connect to him? I mean, you mentioned him before, I know, but what was exactly how the connection started?
I'm not sure how I got to know him, but I know the situation. He was stuck
Mm-hmm.
in New York
Mm-hmm.
as an obsessive compulsive, apparently, where he had an apartment full of newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, full of newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
as obsessive compulsive can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if the diagnosis is correct or not, but anyway, he wanted to have his newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
and he had to get out of there because he's going nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I somehow made a contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked him very much. I liked his intelligence and his sort of freshness.
But that was in late 60s or
Oh, it was early,
early?
I think so.
Uh-huh. But he's younger than you. He's probably
Oh, he's a lot
late
younger,
70s. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I helped him to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And later I helped him to come to Norway.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gotten money from the king
Mm-hmm.
of Norway at that time, a scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And I considered him a dear friend.
Mm-hmm.
And we continued to have visits once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether he came to the lab or not. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a beautiful guy.
Is he in New York now? Or
No, he's moved to Norway.
He's in Norway
Yeah, now.
now.
Yeah.
Where?
The south of Norway with his wife.
He has Norwegian wife.
I think so.
Huh.
And it's, I have it upstairs somewhere in an email I just got not long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be handy to have me. I'll talk to him for sure, actually. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of information
Mm-hmm.
about Fluxus and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very super intelligent guy.
But with Fluxus itself, you did not overlap much with Fluxus, the group.
Fluxus as such, no.
Mm-hmm.
I knew of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one point where we sort of joined in a way, funny way, at the Armory.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was in New York.
Yes.
Where we were showing something or another.
Mm-hmm.
May have been television, it may have been I just don't remember what the hell we were doing.
Mhm.
It was something very special,
Yes.
and Fluxus was related to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really get terribly involved because these were mostly artists, except Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got in contact with Paul. I think he just
Mm-hmm.
heard about me and came.
Mm-hmm. But that must have been before you published the articles in Radical Software. So you think he read your books on
Yeah, Radical Software came,
after you got to know Paul?
I think, after I got him.
Uh-huh.
Or I helped him. I think I don't want to be too extreme because I know, the other people probably helped him too.
Mm-hmm. Should we say hi?
It serves you right.
Yes. For?
Taking his picture earlier, I think.
Uh-huh.
Now you get it back.
Uh-huh.
Or you too, Ray. You like being taken a picture of.
Oh, I like taking pictures. Being taking pictures, that was true. I am vain.
Yeah.
In my own way. But, so I would advise you to talk with him.
Yeah. All right.
And he's a very good informant.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like you, he has this
Mm-hmm.
memory and he has things sorted out.
Mm-hmm. But Andy Warhol, John Cage, the kind of more famous artistic crowd in New York, they did not enter into your life directly.
No,
Uh-huh.
no. I knew them and I admired them
Mm-hmm.
individually and also I admired the whole gang.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was too busy with my own things.
Mm-hmm.
And but Paul was special.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good. Should we watch a bit of the film? I want to take
Yeah.
a rest as you
Rather
prefer.
rest.
Yeah? Okay. I'll then grab the computer.
What time is it?
5:30.
Say
I know.
again?
It's gonna be hot.
Oh.
If you grab this, it's gonna be hot.
That's the.
I don't know if you want it, but
I would,
Warren
yeah,
needs
sure,
to drink
sure.
something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's okay to put it on here.
No, I'm
or
gonna
you
find
have-
something.
Yeah. I'll wait for.
I thought this was it.
And I think that my articles,
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't we just, you can share this for now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for asking.
Uh-huh.
were fundamental articles.
Mm-hmm.
They were, really touched the heart of things.
Mm-hmm. The ones in the Radical Software.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The Mickey Max and
Mm-hmm.
Bio Teams
Yes.
is exactly right.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we're finding out now, that
Mm-hmm.
Mickey Max are getting weaker and the Bio Teams are getting stronger. Getting significant.
Mm-hmm.
And biological simulation is becoming very important.
Mm-hmm.
And before, life was something that came from God.
Mm-hmm. It's very hot. Okay, I'll grab the computer so we can watch it with the fan.
No,
Just check one thing if I have the McCulloch film online, but you can talk already.
no, I think I didn't do justice to my feeling that Warren had an underground network,
Uh-huh.
which was, I don't know that there's anybody, it was people he supported,
Mm-hmm.
and his the people he gave a year to, I never know what to call him, got his support over a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just 1 year with Warren, it was, he would be helping you in your career. For instance, I had no money when I left Warren.
Mm-hmm.
And
They thought he put you in charge of the camp, or
yeah,
he
right,
helped.
and that was 2 years basically.
Uh-huh.
And so that time I had some income.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember what my wife had. I lost her then, or I'd been blah blah blah. I'd been a psychiatrist, blah blah blah. It was income, good income, and I left. Anyway,
Just trying
but
to
I think
see.
he continued to support people, so that he pulled the strings that he could. I think that made a difference. 'Cause, being with Warren is a very heady affair.
But do you think it was driven solely by his private kind of concern of the people involved? And
I think so. I mean, it could be that that the CIA could have been involved. As I was related, let's see if I can remember. I didn't get clearance all the way. And at one point I thought CIA support, but there was a friend of mine who was in the CIA or was related to the CIA, and he became a doctor related to the CIA. And I wrote them a letter at that point, sort of saying I was interested in that, something of the sort. I was pretty desperate at the time.
And that was when?
It's hard to. I think that was pretty early before I met Warren. And I think it was quite early. And then I told you about this meeting to organize this, to describe a school that would be ideal for foreign children of foreign
Yes.
officials.
Yes.
But that was the CIA affair.
Uh-huh.
But they picked us for reasons that had to do with we had creative people. More than that.
Didn't you have a guy called Harold Wolf? Or Wolf?
No.
Who was a doctor like this? It's written like this.
No.
Because one thing that I still cannot fully account for is that in your book, I think the Earth Child actually, you think, can I actually grab it? And it will help.
Yeah.
It's upstairs, right?
Yeah.
Because you have an acknowledgement section there, which is very interesting. So, I think here you thank a number of people. By the way, Victor Joshua, what was your relationship to him?
He was a published. He published
Uh-huh.
the first version, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
I think it was Earthchild.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's obvious here. It says that he was series editor. But did you have a personal connection with him of some kind, or did you know him from somewhere, or?
I had met with him. I was a friend of his, but not any deep friend. He was not a. It's somebody who sort of came along and said, I can publish your book.
Yeah, because he then did a lot of work about LSD, and I think he took a lot of LSD also.
Yeah.
Eventually. But that's not what I wanted to ask you about. Oh, that's all your notes on the book.
Yeah.
It'd actually be nice to look at. If you don't mind. But here, in the acknowledgements...
You can take it with you, I think, and then...
No, but it's fine, I can take photos of it, but that's not the acknowledgements I was seeking. Maybe it's in this book. Yeah. So, let's see how many of those names that we haven't yet discussed you can remember and what memories they might trigger.
I'm afraid I have to get my other glasses.
Upstairs?
Upstairs in my bed, room, your bedroom.
In the room where we went?
Yeah, where you are, and on the left-hand side in a glass case.
Here you go.
Oh, thanks very much.
Sure. I brought a copy for myself. So, the first few are very easy. So, we discussed all of them.
But I would point to you that
Uh-huh.
a family is a living thing, a creature spanning time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sort of important idea of creatures being including a family as a creature,
Yes.
rather than as a bunch of individuals or a living creature, like many living creatures.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Good. So, the first name that I'm not sure I know is Jim Beaver.
Jim Beaver died, but rather early. He was the man who ran the Dancing Lady.
Mm-hmm.
With the, I insisted on having two computers. One was a digital, and the other was a what do you call it? Not digital,
Analog.
analog computer.
Uh-huh.
And that was his job, to try and see if he could arrange it that it would have some kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because
But he worked with you in the lab.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Sam Mason?
Sam Mason was an engineer who was a compassionate kind of guy who helped me when things were a bit dismal.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me the feeling of being, I can be close to the engineers.
Mm-hmm. Bob and Marge Quarnes?
I mean, yeah. That Marge Quarnes was the head nurse of the laboratory at the family study project. So we had people living in the hospital and
In Georgetown or in
at an IMH. Yeah.
Others? Robert Cohen?
He was the sort of the one who was leading the R section of at NIMH. He was a good guy. He got me this. I mean, he helped me to be a part of the family study project.
William Malamud?
Malamud was Professor. Malamud was one of the main people in my psychiatric training.
Ali Javan we talked about. That's the laser guy, right?
Yeah. Right.
Nathan Ackerman?
He was another family therapist, but he wasn't a family therapist in my style, because he would see the family members individually.
Bernard Bandler?
He was, again, a part of my, he was a teacher.
Eleanor Ring?
The blind study project. She was the one who came to me and said, we have these blind children. I need some help. So I worked. These are blind children without
So
who are
Anna,
mentally disturbed, according
Yes.
to me.
So Anna Freud we know. Phyllis Noble. Noble.
I don't know. I remember her as a very good friend.
Mm-hmm.
More than that, I don't know.
So Selfridge at MIT, right?
Yeah.
You had contact with him. Kevin Lynch at MIT.
Yeah.
Fremont Smith. I mean, I know what he did, but what was your connection to him, if any? Other than he was a very good contact of McCulloch.
Maybe through McCulloch, I don't know.
Eugene Bell.
He was the one in charge of my. He was the one I worked under, or with, both, with that study project for the.
NASA?
No, of the Cambridge schools.
Ah, yes, okay. Betty Bassamania?
She was at the NIMH, and she was a social worker.
Bob Dysinger?
He was in the same project as me, with in the family study project with Murray Bowen.
Yes, that we know.
He didn't make out too well either. He ended up at the hospital as a patient himself.
So George Gardner?
He was one of my teachers at the Judge Baker. Judge Baker Children's Center, where he was a teacher of.
From Reichman we know. John Murray?
Friedrich Reichmann.
No, from Reichman we discussed, but yeah, if you remember anything else. You worked with her intersected with her in Washington, right?
Yeah, I was learning at that time.
Yeah. Was she important for your intellectual development?
Well, she was I was becoming a psychoanalyst. And in Boston, they didn't want me they didn't accept me in the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. And of course I was a bit strange, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, they accepted me at the Washington Psychoanalytic Institute. And she was one of my teachers. And she was a very fine woman. And when the other students and most people didn't agree with my way of doing things, particularly I remember one case where, just quickly, that I told the patient didn't know what happened as a child, and I said, well, look, she said, maybe I could paint it. So I said, you bring the paints and do it. And actually she did it at home, but she brought pictures as a child which she didn't remember, but it came out that she had been a child of, well, they were in some island,
Yes.
remote island,
Yes.
and
Like some kind of
yeah, I think I told you that.
internet, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. And yeah.
And her ex-husband of Eric Fromm, did you never
No.
intersected with him?
No. I knew of him.
You know, he was a neighbor of Edward Hall at some
I
point.
didn't know that.
Yeah, when they were both teaching at that school in Benning, what was the name? They were both teaching in a small college in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Bennington, I think. So there are a lot of letters. There is an unpublished manuscript of Eric Fromm's book in Edward Hall's archives
Okay.
because he sent it to him. John Murray?
Uh, John Murray.
Yeah.
I think he was a teacher as well.
Uh-huh.
Think psychoanalyst.
Una Helgesen, does it? You know?
He was one of my psychoanalytic teachers
Uh-huh.
who I didn't get along with at the end.
Okay. Bakker, no. Ruth Bohr?
She was my real psychoanalyst.
Yours.
Mine.
Uh-huh.
And then one day I came and she wasn't there.
Mm.
I think I told you the story.
And what happened there?
Well, a week before the holiday, I had told her, your breathing
Oh, yes, she
is not good.
Uh-huh.
And then she had died.
Uh-huh.
It was quite a shock. Come to your psychoanalyst and she's not there because she's dead.
Uh-huh.
Winifred Whitman. She had to do with psychiatry, psychoanalysis, I think. Very fine woman. Anders Richter, I don't remember what
Mm-hmm.
he did.
Madame Colors?
No,
Harold Hughes?
no.
Okay, the rest I think more or less I know. But didn't, well. So Korzybski, all of those, you know, but E. Cummings, Gertrude Stein, I mean, what was the influence on you? I mean, is it just you
Yeah.
putting some interesting names in it?
Yeah, well,
It's a-
these
it's
are-
an
these were-
interesting mix.
These were people who were close in their way.
So Jean and Frank Getlein, who are those?
No, remember.
It's a couple.
No.
Okay.
Martin and George Da Vinci was a photographer in Washington.
Yes,
Good
you
friend.
mentioned. So the other part here that interests me is once you look at the institutions that you think. So NASA, okay, Washington School of Psychiatry, okay, Institute, okay, MIT, okay, Office of Economic Opportunity. Do you know why you think that?
That's the Office of Economic Yeah, that opportunity, that was the project with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Creative Science Seminar of New York University. That did not have to do with that 7 evenings, whatever it was called, program where you gave a talk in New York to Robert Rauschenberg and a bunch of others. Whatever it was called,
I don't
ETA.
Remember.
Because you did give a speech at this. What was it called? 7 nights. Oh, anyway, okay. Well,
There was a seminar every 2 weeks for some short time.
But the real question I have is about this Human Ecology Fund. So, do you have any recollection why on earth are you thinking that?
I think the Human Ecology Fund. I really don't remember, but I think they gave me some money. I'm not sure.
But do you remember to do what?
Nothing, you know. No, I
Nothing
think
like
those.
hypnosis or anything of that kind. You know, worked on hypnosis.
No, it doesn't seem right. I remember it existed and it was interesting, but
There was a guy there called James Monroe who coordinated it. That name does not sound familiar.
there's a James Monroe at the top now.
Uh-huh. I mean, the reason why they are interesting is because they were really the CIA operation. So it existed, they were set up by the CIA and existed because of CIA, and they funded a lot of psychologists and social scientists to do a lot of work on brainwashing and hypnosis. And so when I found that in the acknowledgements, it kind of stood out.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was not any major affair.
Yeah, they give small grants, so it does not imply anything.
They may have given small grants. Somebody sent me, got me the money.
Samuel Lyerly was also another guy who was involved.
Who?
Samuel Lyerly or Learly, I think Lyerly is the
Lear,
name.
maybe. But that didn't exist
Uh-huh.
for me. What comes to mind is somewhere I got money to travel to Bates and Gregory,
Uh-huh.
but I had no reason to attach it to that. If I did, I don't think so. Was it
But to visit him where? On the West Coast or
in Hawaii?
in Hawaii? But that was already right before you left for Norway, or it was still
Yeah, it
in
was
the...
not before. Yeah, about that time.
But this
But
is
I don't-
68, so the book is
Then
published
I
in
don't know.
68. Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. Then I have no idea.
Uh-huh.
Maybe.
It's funny, when you search for Human Ecology Fund and Bateson on Google, the third result is your book. So
What?
when you search for Human Ecology Fund
Yeah.
and Bateson, the third result that you get is this book. Because you mentioned both Bateson and Human Ecology Fund.
Okay.
And there aren't so many others.
Pilot school, environmental ecology lab,
So it was really, the reason why it's so controversial is because it was related to this MK Ultra, whatever it was called, MK Ultra project of the CIA, which got a lot of attention in the 60s
Yeah.
and 70s as it started, as it was investigated.
Yeah, I've heard
So
of
the
him.
people who were there, I'll just read you out some names who are affiliated with the Human Ecology Project. Harold Wolf, that I already mentioned, Lawrence Hinkle,
No,
then people who worked for CIA, Phyllis Sheridan,
no,
Helen Goodell,
and Goodall.
Helen Goodell is the
No.
law. And then Joseph Hinsey.
No.
Wow, I didn't even know. I now discovered something that I had no idea existed. There was a guy called Adolf Burle, who was very important in the U.S. government. He was also involved with it. But okay, the others then, the Samuel Lyerly, Robert Goodnow,
Robert,
Goodnow,
no.
Preston Abbott,
No.
Edgar Shane,
No.
Robert Williams,
No.
David Rhodes.
David,
Rhodes, R-H-O-D-S.
yeah, no.
All right, well, that's fine. Let me just spell the name. John Gittinger, maybe?
No.
No. Okay. I'll just write down the architect you said. You remember the last name?
Estelle. I think it's Robert Estelle. I'm not sure about the first name. But you could look at Robert Estelle and
Robert or Rogers? Robert.
I think it was Robert, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, sure. Robert Esdale. Yeah, I found him. Died in 1987.
Yeah.
He has a son, Peter. Wrote in his.
Peter Estelle, yeah. Somehow I remember him.
The son or the father? The son, you remember?
Son.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's Robert. The father is what I remember. My relation.
So you think he had a connection to Architectural Association, right? So somebody, we haven't found that other person who connected you to him, but
No.
he didn't.
No.
So you just came to Norway, and how did you find this Asdale person then?
Through this person who referred me to it.
So there was a person in Architectural Association with whom Robert was in touch.
Well, the way it went was somebody at the AA told me at the moment that I was determined to leave and to go to Norway.
Yes.
And I talked to him and he said, well, I know one person you can call.
Mm-hmm.
And actually it was not Estelle.
Mm-hmm.
It is someone else whose name I really don't remember.
Uh-huh.
And he said to me,
Mm-hmm.
Warren, I can't do anything for you,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a Canadian here who's a bit lonely for another Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you call him?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I remember as being the facts.
Mm-hmm.
But who it was first, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
He was a member of the faculty at the
Mm-hmm.
at the university. What I call Triumph, NTNU.
But just to refresh your memory and mine, your initial contact with AA, how did that happen? It was not Sir Gordon Pask.
No, absolutely not. No, it was. I think it was through Blair Hamilton.
Uh-huh.
And Blair Hamilton is an interesting guy. I looked up Blair Hamilton, and he also is a sort of well-known guy in his time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was interested in light bulbs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and then light bulbs that were effective and so on and so forth. And here he has his own archive or something like that.
Yeah, you mentioned him. I think
From
I wrote to
Montreal.
him.
He's
Uh-huh.
from Montreal.
Uh-huh.
I think I mentioned him before. And we built tree houses
Uh-huh.
together
Yeah.
on Avery's farm. Estate is really the
Mhm.
more correct statement.
I'm just looking. You sent me a message about Blair in September of last year.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Let's see what So I did find Blair Hamilton, who was living and working in Vermont. Yes.
Yeah, I don't
And I
think
wrote
he's
to
alive.
you. No, he's alive.
Okay.
He had an email and he has everything online. So I mean, we looked at his CV. So let's see what he was doing. So he had a Master of Architecture from McGill,
Sounds right.
but he got it in '77, so he could not be the one. I doubt he was the one who put you in touch with the Architectural Association, unless he did a lot of stint, kind of building things, and then went back to get his master's.
Well, the one I found had been working with light bulbs, so maybe I've got the wrong one. It sounds more right to use the architect.
No. He's working with energy efficiency, renewable energy field.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah. So he ended up in Vermont, which also seemed like an
Vermont
appropriate
is
place
right.
for him to end up. Just that it seems that his experiences in architecture start sometime in mid 70s. So maybe he got his master's after he was helping him build houses and all of that. Because his master's from McGill is from 1977.
Well, that seems correct. He was young.
Oh yeah. So now I see that he wrote a paper called Pneumatic Structures, Cybernetics and Ecology in something called Responsive House, published by MIT Press in 1972. It's definitely him.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I never knew about this Responsive House. Apparently I even checked out that book and I probably scanned it. Let's see. Yeah, so there was a conference on short sleeve session in the responsive house building technologies held at the MIT Department of Architecture May 3rd, 5th, 1972. Maybe you were even there. I don't know. So this is where he published it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 1972 is
This is
when I came.
Uh-huh.
I came to Norway, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you came in 1972.
I think so.
Or can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Was your mother's name Levi?
Say it again.
Can you say? Was your mother's name Levi? Levy?
That was her family name.
Spelled with an E or an Y?
Why?
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Blanche.
Okay, so I'll need to look into. So you think he was the connection to the Architectural Association? It was
Yeah,
Blair
I think
Hamilton.
so.
Mm-hmm. Just check that on cybernetics. And he knew Negroponte?
I don't know.
Uh-huh. And how did you get to know him? Blair Hamilton? He just appeared at some point at the
He more or less just appeared at the farm, at the Avery's.
The quarry.
At the quarry.
Should you watch some of the film, or would you prefer? Or do you need some rest?
I don't need rest, but I think it's important what you consider most important.
No, I think it's it's. Let's watch a little bit of the film and see what it produces. If it's does not produce much by way of commentary or comments, then we can just go back to our thinking. If you want to look through the book, I mean, this book had a lot of notes on it, so I was really impressed. Let me look through the notes and see if I might have some questions.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
But I assume you wrote those comments after you've seen the book, so it was just. So there are some names here. Or let's see. Should I start from the? How does it start? So here the acknowledgements are very short.
The first book was published through a publisher who bought it. And the second publication was, see, this is my idea about time. The second publisher said, well, I can put it out in a paperback, and it will be, it'll have much bigger audience.
So what is this? Do you know?
What's written on it?
No, because you credit, I think, in the acknowledgements, you credit
Good.
Negroponte for it. So I was just curious how it's connected to him.
Well, I think it's his.
Put it there, whatever it was called. But that's the Jabrils? No? I mean, I don't know what those books are.
I don't know, something that he created anyway. Here's the title.
Connected.
Put something here first. Echo connected now, period. It may simply survive. I'm not sure. This is, each one had a title on the second.
curious about the notes of the end. Here I might find some names.
My English, my writing is not the best. This one. Hopefully gets used to it.
Chapter why the way in the space for But these notes, do you know when they were made? Benjamin Lee Whorf, I see you mentioning. You were familiar with? So, I mean, this is all Benjamin Lee Whorf, the linguist, who was a big influence on whole.
Count Korzybski?
No, Korzybski and above. Benjamin Lee Whorf. I mean, you shorten Benjamin to Bench, but.
Yeah. Well, he's somebody that I thought was important.
Ah, yeah, that's the guy. Now we see Von Bertalanffy. Bertalanffy. See his name.
Yeah.
So what is this list? They know
That's
those
general systems.
Yeah,
theory.
yeah.
I think it's a list of references for each chapter. The Silent Realms, R.T. Hall. Edward T. Hall. The Principal Scream, Fritz
Perls. What about Fritz Perls, by the way? Primal Scream, yeah. What about him? Do you remember much?
No.
He was one of the founders of Esalen Institute.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when you say it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known otherwise. Normal developmental learning and the education
Of the child.
of the child
Born blind.
I think that's my own.
Yes.
Time and space.
But time and space is what?
I think it's mine. I think that's what's on there. Cutsworth with Blind Children. Famous English something. Blind woman. See, maybe this woman who was able to
Blind woman. Famous English blind woman.
blind.
But who's what was her?
I don't know. I think I get an association again to some person who managed to decode something important for English. McCulloch, McLuhan, Mao and contradiction. That was an important.
It was
Important to me.
even before Norway.
Yeah.
So you were reading Mao already in the States.
Yeah. Engels. Dialectic of nature.
But can I ask you? So how common was it to read Mao and Engels among the people you were working with? While you were still doing.
Well, I'm not sure this was written.
That's what I was asking. So so that seems like something you've written maybe in Norway.
Maybe. I read more Mao afterwards, but It's quite possible I was interested in Mao and Engels before. Because I don't think, I think Mao and Engels were important before I went to
Norway. Well, I don't know. I mean, there are some letters of yours that already sound angry enough about capitalism, even when you're still in the U.S.
So I think actually that's maybe here it is. Yeah. Hello. Yeah, it's Warren Brody. Harold? Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. It's a long time since. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, it's too late. I was thinking about it. Oh, that's too bad. But also, it's not so bad because after all, we come and we go. He lived a long time. Good. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. And somehow he disappeared from the scene. Yes, like he got involved with some lady and I don't know what happened after that. Yeah. That's a beautiful image.
It's him talking for 2 hours. Nice. Play it.
Yeah. How old was he?
It's a friend who passed away.
85. Well, I loved him dearly. He and I were close pals for a long time, and then somehow he disappeared from the radar. Well, it's more than that. But I'm glad he had more time than that. Because it was something like maybe 10 years ago or something like that. When he was... Okay. Yeah. 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 Just a minute. Oh, yes, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, good. Well, Harold, I'm very glad you called me, and I'm sorry you're bringing this news, but, you know, that happens. And I'm 93, so I understand. So, yeah, we were very close. Well, Harold, I'm living in Sweden at this point. I come to town sometime, but come to Oslo sometimes. But sometime we should get together if possible. What are you doing now? Okay. Yeah, yeah. I go to the ashram of Prim Baba. Prim Baba. Prim Baba. P-R-I-M. Yeah, Prim is, I think, the word honored. Yeah. No, P. Yeah, P for Peter. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's P-R-I-M. Koina?
Yeah.
Is it Prim? P-R-I-M?
P-R-E-M.
P-R-E-M. Prem Baba. Yeah. I've been going there I've been there twice now, but it's a silent retreat. Yeah. So if we get a chance someday, we should meet. Not that I know of. Would you send me an email or a message with your number? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I'm sorry that he passed, but anyway, you know, we all do that.
Warren?
Yeah. Oh, I'm very glad that, you know, I'm glad you had that time. It's very important. I had it with my mother when she died. So consider yourself fortunate. And I send my love to you and to the family, you know, such as it is. And we try and meet one of these days. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, I feel the same. Yes. Good. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Shelter died.
Yeah, I figured.
Your friend from?
He was my friend for many years, and then he sort of disappeared the last while.
Mm.
But Warren, he was here after his wife died.
Okay.
He came here the New Year after his wife died because I don't think he had any place he felt.
Yeah, he worked hard to deal with her, and then he found somebody else who looked after him, and when he died, he was quite content with that. There's no problem.
Mm.
Son is in the middle all of the time.
Mm.
So, and I used to know his son quite well.
Did you get the impression it was a good departure?
Yeah, a very good departure.
Oh, good.
So I have one more name to run by you. Conan Kornetsky.
Hmm?
One more name to run by you. Conan Kornetsky.
No.
No, was a doctor. Kornetsky, no. And Robert Hyde. Also.
Robert?
Hyde. H-I-D-E. Or Bob Hyde. Robert
No.
Hyde. No. Okay. Good. So, I don't know, we can, I mean, I saw a car arrive. I don't know if it was Karen's
Oh, it's my
cousin, yeah.
Yeah. So, the feeling I have was that the CIA was mingled
Mm-hmm.
in many ways with
Yes,
the whole situation.
yes.
And they weren't necessarily very negative.
Mm-hmm.
They were supporting the scientists
Yes,
and supporting them to try and give America some advantages.
yes.
So, what they were doing other places wasn't.
Hello,
Yeah,
What?
no, sure. But it got a bit transgressive when, you know, they were giving LSD to people. They didn't know it was LSD. You know, it got a bit,
Okay.
with the human experiments in the US also it got a bit.
Yeah, no, I
The
know.
brainwashing side, yeah.
Yeah. All
So
of
they did a
that.
lot
I
of-
believe all of that happened.
Uh-huh.
But I had no personal knowledge
Yes.
of the negative side.
Uh-huh.
And somehow I think Warren got
Yes.
help from
Uh-huh.
Swanson and from other people. And
Harold Wooster, I think was the name. Wooster was the guy working with Swanson. Harold Wooster. That was the boss of Swanson.
Okay. Well, I have no contact.
There was a funny letter from Swanson to McCulloch where she talks about you.
That was.
She kind of tells McCulloch never to send people like that again to her. No, she says something like, despite the crazy encounter I've had, I would still be keen to see in people that you send me, something along those lines. So I think she thought you were a bit out of it when she met you.
Well, I was.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had no. I went there with no experience in mathematics and finding mathematics impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was fascinated by the people and and struggling my best to sort of enter into. I didn't participate because I knew I didn't know nothing.
Yes.
But still, I was appreciated that I could go there,
Yeah.
and I knew that I knew this was an extra special affair.
Yes.
Yeah, so that you didn't.
No, it says just was a funny anecdote.
I think it's
not-
funny, and
yeah,
it's good that you tell me.
Uh,
These things are, each thing that happens.
yeah,
I see now the negatives as being,
Yeah.
in some ways, positive,
yeah,
because it teaches you about things you don't know, things that you're stupid about, and the like. This is that message. It's not so scary anymore. People find you irrelevant or
yes.
disgusting or whatever it may be. I am a strange
Yeah.
guy. So that's as it is. It's,
But I think Swanson got a bit obsessed with Judaism eventually.
got a bit.
Obsessed with Judaism and the kind of Semitic project of Israel, and she wrote a lot of angry letters to Gotthard Günther, the German philosopher who was close to McCulloch, and they
Yeah.
kept in touch. And I discovered those letters in Gotthard Günther's archive, where she was increasingly unhappy with how little support the US government was showing to Israel, which of course was the complete opposite of reality because they were giving them a lot of support. But I think she got really into kind of Judaic faith, and she rediscovered her Jewish roots. But that maybe just be her personal reaction as she was getting older. But Albert found her, we found her living in near Washington, and she just didn't want to talk or get interviewed. That Albert tried to talk her into speaking on the record about what happened in the 60s. She wouldn't agree. So, and then I sent her messages and called, and also I got nowhere. But she was still alive as of 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really get to know her at all. So
Yeah.
I knew that Warren got support from her. So that support, you're saying, came from the CIA.
No, it came from a very innocent kind of, not innocent, but it came from the Air Force.
Air Force.
So, where other networks of Warren came from, I don't know. They could have come from. Who knows?
It's fine. It's it's my way of thinking. Is there's always this three-dimensional, at least weaving
Yes.
of different threads, which I told you about before. When I was under the scuba diving,
Yes.
where you're surrounded by these threads of currents which are different than each other and yet consistent, but and they are interacting all the time, but they don't lose their identity necessarily. They can change the way they relate, but they somehow have a longer time duration than the interaction at any particular moment, which is, as I said before, they have this continuum, which is contradictory to what we're saying. This is a nice lady who's a good friend, cousin.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Evgeny.
Maria.
Nice to meet you.
Hello. Hi. Oh, everything okay?
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine?
We have this friend visiting.
Yes. I heard
Well, I
Karina said you're talking all the time.
He's talking, I'm listening.
No, is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're just listening.
Yes.
And you're talking.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, no, he's interviewing.
Yeah?
That's his work.
Yes.
So I'm glad.
You're glad.
Yeah, why not? Everybody's glad to be interviewed.
Somebody's listening to you.
It's an audience of one, but we hope to grow it.
Yes, that's good. That's good. Now we're 3, yes.
Good.
You have been able to do all the things you're supposed to do.
Recording.
He's answering the right
We do it
questions.
we do it every year.
Every year?
So, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I check whether the answers he gives they check out.
Okay.
So I'm seeing
And
if,
it's about
if he makes a
similar.
mistake and says something new.
If I get 100%, that would be unusual.
Yes.
If I get 50%, that's unusual. But
Is
maybe
that
I
called-
got 10%.
So
Okay,
far they check
okay.
out, so he must be telling the truth.
Yes.
You
And
know,
it's,
you know when
it's development. It's called
when
Yeah.
we tell the story of our first marriage, first wedding,
Yeah.
your first wedding.
yeah, it's different every time, but it's true every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's been different for 15 years, but it's always true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you know,
That's
Yes.
that's life.
I don't know how to say the same thing twice.
Impossible.
Well, we have it on the records.
Okay.
Good, but and Edward Hall was definitely involved with the CIA at some point.
Say that again.
Edward Hall,
Edward T. Hall.
yeah. You think he was involved with the CIA at some point?
För det var det jag tänkte så här. Då tänkte jag så här, jag vet inte vad solen ligger.
I have no reason to say that.
So you think it just extended to the State Department and never really went beyond? Because in the State Department he did a lot of work.
He did a lot of work, and he was giving them a lot of good advice
Ja, precis.
about, for example, as he talked about, you know, how do you deal with coming to an American, coming to a foreign country,
Yes.
and
Sort of
they
diplomatic.
immediately want to put up because these people
We'll just
smell.
close it so that it doesn't disrupt the recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You know, that
Uh-huh.
the Americans find that these people smell of
Mm-hmm.
garlic and other things,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not being washed very often.
Mm-hmm.
And so they then set up some sort of, they come to the office of the American
Mm-hmm.
consulate. They have a big, the table is very high, so they're on one side and they're on the other.
Mm-hmm.
So they have control of the distance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the people are protected,
Mm-hmm.
as the people at the consulate are protected, but they also lose relationship, with no relationship,
Mhm.
because there's got this big wall inside
Yes.
between them.
Uh-huh.
And you know, to get people to know the difference between cultures,
Mm-hmm.
so that they really accept that,
Yes.
is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone who thinks their own culture is the only culture,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly if you haven't traveled very much.
Mm-hmm.
And then those who do travel, they make all the people into the same, and
Mhm.
you know, foreigners. So these are things that Edward T. Hall was working at,
Mm-hmm.
and just teaching people about time, for example, you know, the time in one culture and the time in another culture, and how they rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, particularly when you get to primitive cultures, or what we call primitive,
Mm-hmm.
often quite sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
If they have their own systems,
Mm-hmm.
then people don't have a base to learn about the systems.
Mm-hmm.
So strangers, because they are
Yes.
they are the foreigners too.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was talking about that the difference, the change
Mm-hmm.
from culture to culture needs to be something that is really understood as such.
Mm-hmm.
Humans who have different basic structures
Mm-hmm.
of thought and of habit,
Yes.
and you know, so that digging in,
Uh-huh.
and this is what he understood, and he was teaching at the
School of Foreign Service. Or what was
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Uh-huh.
because this is something he specialized in, not only with humans, but there was a guy by the name of Albert Shelfin.
Shelfing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He was working with this too.
Mm-hmm. With the body language.
Hmm?
With the body language. Yeah.
Yeah, the body
language. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And you know, these are languages. These are things which are primitive and
Mm-hmm.
fundamental,
Mm-hmm.
and much more fundamental than people can appreciate because they're invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And they're invisible because they're so widely, they're so big
Mm-hmm.
that you can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
They're too common. They haven't. They're just in the wind.
Uh-huh.
And the people who try to introduce these concepts, they
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange. I was talking with a friend of Karina's, and I was saying that she's going around trying to teach people about family
Mm-hmm.
and new ways of thinking and all that and of experiencing. And I was saying that I had a friend who was teaching family therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and she became very aggressive about it,
Mm-hmm.
and she managed to carry it all around the world
Mm-hmm.
because she's clear, well precise, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But she had to do it in a way that was
Mm-hmm.
extremely aggressive,
Yes.
and all the subtlety was out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But she succeeded, but I don't know that it was really family therapy anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she died in the end. She sent a very nice letter to everybody. She said, "I'm dying."
Mm-hmm.
And but she was like the Maginot Line,
Mm-hmm.
too hard and too.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a choice one has to make.
Mm-hmm. So, an open-ended question for you. So, if you were to connect various, thinkers and intellectual movements you were part of, so
Yeah.
starting with family therapy, moving on to cybernetics, introducing maybe Bateson and McLuhan and Edward Hall along the way, what do you think was the common denominator of how all of those movements looked at the world and life and man that made them interesting for you? Do you see any commonalities in how they perceive reality that would explain why your path was what it was? Because, if you were to talk to strangers and you would tell them that this man had an interest in Warren McCulloch and Edward T. Hall, it will not be a very large number of people who are interested in both. And if you were to introduce McLuhan and Bateson and many other people you were involved with, it will be an even smaller circle at the intersection. So what do you think all of them had in common in terms of how they perceived reality or approached it methodologically?
Well, I say about myself that I have a curiosity about things that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they're not important, not because they are unknown in a sense,
Yes.
but because they're so fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
They're things that keep life moving
Mm-hmm.
and stop it from being a repetition.
Mm-hmm.
They're opening knowledge that people have within them,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to know.
But those things exist, they're just not visible.
They're not
So they're
visible.
talking about invisible things, not things that don't exist.
Well, they don't exist for the people
Mm-hmm.
who need to observe them
Mm-hmm.
because they're invisible, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to introduce people to something that's invisible to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be done in a way that is enables them to touch
Mm-hmm.
this life
Mm-hmm.
with their own sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell them about them, that's very interesting, but what? So what?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is, it's interesting, but so what? It has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that we talk about the church getting so much power.
Yeah.
We don't want to know about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because God is in heaven and the devil's in the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, those are important things.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep decided.
And how do you think cybernetics fit into it, and what McCulloch was doing into this view of the world as trying to uncover these invisible forces? I mean, wouldn't you say that psychoanalysis kind of, I mean, the initial Freudian project tried to do that, to bring on the surface all those invisible forces that actually shape how we live to some extent?
Well, whether they actually shape or whether they're not shaped, they bring them closer.
Mm-hmm.
They make something visible, which may be wrong. It doesn't matter, because then there's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Before there was no question.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving rise to a question which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily that what you say is true,
Yes.
because that's secondary. To make something exist
Mm-hmm.
is more important than whether what you say or what you see is true or not.
Mm-hmm.
You're opening
Yes.
something that didn't exist before, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
The question is it important?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just more of the same?
Yes.
It's more of the same, forget it. It's not important.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally touches the depths.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. And
So applying it to McCulloch's work, for example, what do you think was he trying to bring out and put on the...
what he was trying to bring out was the cybernetic. That was basically that the things. One, they operate in circles which are dynamic in the sense of their feeding. When the rich man gets richer easier than the poor man.
Okay, there are increasing returns to scale, as a or networked effects, as a
No, the richer you are,
yeah.
the richer it's easier. The easier it is to be rich,
Mm-hmm.
Richer,
Yes.
and that's a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
And the hotter the weather is, the more gas is released,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it hotter.
Yes.
These are feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
And prior times, they saw straight lines.
Mm-hmm.
So the changes that these, the sense of life
Mm-hmm.
as being something that is not a straight line, but is a circle which is not just a circle which is
Mm-hmm.
which is feeding itself.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody gets fatter, then they eat
Yes.
more.
Mm-hmm.
And the child needs to grow in a way that is so that he learns, you know, a little bit at the beginning, but it grows and grows and grows, and learns faster and faster and faster, because each circle makes it easy to go to the next circle. So this is a very fundamental thing. It's all around us. It's in nature. It's in life. And that quality was omitted. Not because anybody didn't know about it, but because it had no existence. They used it all the time.
Yes.
They didn't have the capacity to think about it. They didn't have the capacity to use it with the finesse that comes of learning. I don't know how to say that better.
Yeah, no.
But anyway, so that's important. And the second thing is the speed up that goes on when you have a computer or when you leave the mechanical world. You suddenly are into a world which is a different speed than our own capacity to organize. So that suddenly we're into movements that we cannot perceive ourselves, which has always been. But things can happen in circles which we cannot maneuver in our minds, and sizes that are too big for us to deal with, because we haven't learned to touch deeply enough. But even touching deeply, we can't manage the amount of information that we're immersed in. So when we leave the age of mechanization and go into the age of information manipulation, then you could say, well, it's terrible, because we no longer have control over things. But that's not true, because the computer is teaching us the way to think about things in a new way, which allows us to advance our own ability to take in what's around us. Like, for instance, feedback. Feedback is a nice thing to think about, but it's not just to think about. It's if we understand, if children understood the feedback loops, if children, as I mentioned in the book, if children are really taught about life, then they end up different kind of children. They are able to understand what goes on around them in a manner where their understanding is related to life, and not related to the static stuff that was fed to them before. And the more they learn about life, then the more alive they become. And that's quite a different thing. The main feature of the electronic world is that you're conceiving of things that are not like your muscles. Your muscles get tired. Your muscles, we have been living in the muscular world. Now we live to the world of brain. And at the same time, the brain without the muscles is nothing. Now we take the brain and allow the brain and the world to work together. And it's it's quite a different world when you think about children learning about cybernetics, and in not necessarily as mathematics, but it as a way of thinking. You know, if one chicken has two develops two chickens, then you know it grows very fast, and that's what's happening in the world population. So this is, you know.
But do you think that this perspective, which you had developed by probably early 70s in a mature way, do you think it was reconcilable with what you were beginning to read in Marx and Engels and Mao, and was it a completely different slice of reality and a different way to look at reality? Could you imagine Marxism as a way to talk about some feedback loops as being more important than others? So, you know, capital creates its own feedback loops, and that's the mode of thinking that privileges that particular feedback loop over others. Whereas cybernetics was much more democratic about looking at everything and not privileging the money
What
circuit.
fascinated me about Marxism, Marxist-Leninism, was the effort to see what was going on in the mechanical world during the mechanical age. And Mao describes his, probably not his vision of the mechanical age, looking deeply into it. Labor and capital and all of this. And it's what he was observing is still going on in the third world.
Yes.
And it's still a mechanical age, in many places not even that. And that's not saying that one is worth more than the other. It's just this the way it happens. And I think that we have left the mechanical age now. You know, it just hasn't been cleaned up yet. And that's not just because I'm advanced in my thinking, but it's because...
But can I ask you then, sort of, because otherwise we'll get lost in this. So, but do you think that this separation of ages into mechanical versus information is more important than, say, industrial capital versus financial capital? Because you can have that separation, industrial capitalism versus financial capitalism, and you still retain the notion that there is some operative process that operates, that, you know, investors need a return. Now they can get that return from, I don't know, real estate as opposed to industrial production. So more money goes into real estate. So yes, you've left the industrial world behind, but the logic of getting 5-7% return annually is still there. They find new ways and new tricks. There are central banks involved in you know, stimulating inflation and whatnot. All of that is changing. But why do you think that you get more intellectually from slicing the world history into mechanical versus information, as opposed to, say, industrial versus financial or something like that? I can see why that would be a way to talk in 1960s, 1970s America, where you had to find a way to talk about complexity without looking communist, which is where, you know, cybernetics, system theory, and everything else would come in handy, because you can in fact talk about complex phenomena without having to invoke anything remotely smelling like Marxism or Hegel or anything like that.
Yeah.
But why would you want to keep talking about it now? So you really must believe that that's a more that there is some kind of epistemological confusion driving our consumption of energy, and not the interests of people behind Shell or ExxonMobil or big banks that are invested in them. I'm not challenging you. I'm just
No,
trying
no,
to
no, I
understand.
understand what you're saying. I understand and I agree with you entirely that this just needs explanation. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole business of capital is already dying because it doesn't really serve life.
Now, why do you think that capital needs life?
Because things that are without connection to life. And let me think a bit to see what I'm saying. If you think of making a world which has as its important mechanisms, I call it mechanisms, using that word very discreetly, that is, mechanisms have to do with sums of money and pieces of paper and numbers which have special meanings in a special language which doesn't belong basically to the humanness of people but to their need to share with being share with the religion of the previous times, which was a religion of power, where you have the person on the top gets the most food and gets the most of everything, and the people on the bottom, and that's my capitalist cow poem.
Yes.
They're under the tail, and they're not getting anything except the shit. And the head gets the mouth, gets the grain. So this doesn't really have the means of survival because it no longer has life in it. It lost its life when it became known. As long as it was unconscious and sort of, I won't say unconscious, unknown by common people, then they could be used as they are used now. But people are at least at the beginning of knowing that this system doesn't really have life anymore. It's a bunch of shit. It's a big, it's something that's ready to be considered something to get rid of.
Yes.
Except you don't know how to get rid of it. And shit, you need the shit. So at any particular time. So this is true. But it's sort of, there's something else that has to come, which has to do with life itself. And as soon as you move from two, that is black and white, to three, and to three and more fundamentals,
Yes.
then you left the two-ness of rich and poor, and the mediator and all of that, which is just the same as rich and poor. It's not the third. The third has to do with well-being. It doesn't cost anybody else something. And knowing life around all the creatures and all the creatures, as we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
The creatures, including the animals and the plants and everything, and groups of each of these,
Mhm.
and the interaction of each of these.
Mhm.
Then we're into a different kind of interaction of life,
Mhm.
in a development of an abundance which doesn't necessarily kill everything.
Yes.
And the amount of poison that is being spread at this point is enormous.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I saw a book by James Howard Kunstler upstairs. Is that somebody you read?
Kunstler,
Yeah.
how do you spell Kunstler?
I'll show you. Kunstler.
It
This guy.
doesn't, it may,
Here, I think his name and his photo.
no, I don't know him, but
Uh-huh.
Trainer may have collected that.
Ah.
You see what's up. It's modern.
Yeah, he's modern. Yeah, he's quite young, but he's. I just saw a book on one of your shelves, and he writes a lot about ecology and technology, and how we're all doomed unless we change something radically. It's actually interesting, quite an interesting book that you have.
I don't
upstairs.
remember it. You know, I sometimes buy books and haven't read them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it isn't. My way of thinking is that things won't change
Yes.
because of anybody's thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It'll change because of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what changes things.
Yes.
It's necessary to change, otherwise
Mm-hmm.
this thing
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and we're suffering from it.
Yes.
And when that happens, then it's not necessarily any revolution, it's just that somehow there's in the common, this rhythm I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
a sort of sense of what is right,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of not right in the moral sense, but what fits so that you can live, so that you
Yes.
can be happy. And it's, you know, the plant is growing and there's an abundance.
Yes.
Then people are dissatisfied,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know they're dissatisfied. And then it takes something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That somehow people realize that many people understand that, you know, we've got to change, and they don't know how to change. And in the process of change, then there is some sort of action that occurs which removes the people who don't know how to change. And they become irrelevant. And not because they're antique, but because they're irrelevant in a new way. They don't have any place. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. And they're lost. And so they do the same old thing as they always did.
Yes.
And then it doesn't work. The machine doesn't run. And then you know, there's a play by, I don't think it's UNESCO, one of those writers. In
Cool
which-
to show.
no, I don't think it's her.
Not Beckett. Samuel Beckett.
Beckett type of,
Hmm.
what would they call anyway, these are the plays they were playing with at that time.
Yes.
And there, there's something very fundamental in what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, because our words are inadequate, our concepts are inadequate.
Yes.
It's waiting, growing,
Mm.
and will drop into our heads, some people, and some will never.
Mm-hmm.
And they're lost. They're not only lost because they can, if they can't learn,
Mm-hmm.
they're in trouble.
Yes.
And they can try and stop the action, but it's very hard to stop life without stopping your own life.
Yes. Can I ask a historical question to return to where we were? Gregory Bateson, do you know his opinion on the Vietnam War? I mean, was he affected by the student protests while he was in California? Because he sat on the board of the University of California. He was part of the Regents board, so he must have had some reaction to lots of student protests that were happening.
Well, most of my friends were against the Vietnam War, as far as I know, because I clearly was, and I was very strongly against it. And it seemed ridiculous, loss of life, and it seemed like a sort of, not the word, a decoy, a maneuver to somehow achieve something very different. A decoy, what do you call it? When, you know.
The food will be ready in 15 minutes or so.
No,
Okay.
we're ready. Just chatting.
Yeah. Decoy is to fool people, but there's a better word, but I don't think of it at the moment. That you put something there to frighten people, and to involve people, when really what's going on is something entirely different.
Well, deception of some kind.
Deception, yeah.
Yeah.
And wars are a very good deception. And this, I think, was a deception, because there was no real reason for the war that made any sense, as far as I could tell. And I had friends who were there, and Peter, friends who were there and who didn't really want to participate at all. And they wanted to, they were out to get me too. I was supposed to, and the reason I ended up in NIH was because I wasn't going to shoot anybody, and I looked very hard to find some way to get out of being drafted or taken into it. And I found there's two things I could do. I could work at NIH would be one, and I could work for the
We're talking about Korean War. Or the Vietnam
I'm
War.
talking about
Korean War. Yeah.
But this was equally crazy to me.
Yes.
A decoy, a deception,
Yes.
and it made no sense whatsoever. You know, it's what you do with your playing chess.
Yes.
And
But I mean, it's also interesting you say that, because I mean, you could rationally explain why the U.S. did it as part of the dynamic of the Cold War. That if they wouldn't have done it, then they would have lost the geopolitical power, control, and the rest of it. And then you don't need to be like, that's how kind of leftist Marxists would explain what was happening. Also, it was just a play for geopolitical power between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. I mean, it might have been completely senseless and unnecessary, but
You know, I spent a year in China,
yes.
and that year,
Mm.
any, you know, my thoughts about Mao
Mm.
and the rest. I went there to try and understand.
Mm.
It was part of my purpose in going there.
Yes.
You know, what is this all about?
Mm.
I got there and I realized this is a fascist system,
Mm.
and fascism is fascism.
Mm. And what made it fascist?
Well,
We've never spoken about fascism, actually. Did you? When did you become kind of, how should I say, watching out for appearances of fascism? Was it as well you were still in the United States, or it's something that in Norway kind of became a problem?
no, long before Norway.
But fascist and the kind of very, because you know in America in the everyday use, especially in the 1960s, you know people working for the U.S. government would be presented as fascists by the counterculture. I mean, they're not really fascist by any stretch. If you
No, centralized control.
so, that's
we have a-
totalitarianism.
Centralized control, which is invested in a few people who are
Mm.
using their control for their own purposes.
Okay, that would be oligarchy. So.
Hmm?
That would be some kind of oligarchic.
Well,
Like
fascism is
capitalism.
a kind of oligarchy, and in a sense,
Uh-huh.
fascism is what has existed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not new; it's something old. It just was given its form,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, the church did a lot of it too.
Mm-hmm.
They were, you know, their own fascists, and to burning the witches was, you know.
But so let me just then rephrase the question. So before you went to China, you thought that there would be some kind of more involvement on behalf of workers in running the state? That would be a true dictatorship of the proletariat, where the workers are in control of running the apparatus? I mean, what disappointed you in China that you didn't know before? I mean, what was your expectation on going there? What were you hoping to discover?
I was hoping to discover what was going on. I don't think I was sold on their system of anything.
Sure.
I did.
Fine. So if you discovered fascism there, what would then be communism according to you? So if that was not...
Well, Mao in his writings
Mm-hmm.
presents things as being quite close to what would be meaningful,
Mm-hmm.
where the people who are leading have a deep knowledge and caring
Mm-hmm.
about the people who are under his leadership or her leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And where the idea is to mediate
Mm-hmm.
as a leader
Mm-hmm.
the welfare of
Mhm.
everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and to be related to the welfare of everybody, because that's what they talk about now,
Yes.
if you read his books.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come there and you discover that the favoritism,
Mm-hmm.
that Mao and the communist government presents an upper class
Mm-hmm.
who is entrenched upper class, entrenched by the government.
Mm-hmm.
This is nothing to do with what Mao had written about, or the group of people who wrote those books. It's questionable that he wrote.
Yes.
So they had a concept that was good, and but the people who were using this concept to take control didn't really understand that. They had other ideas, and they had the idea of how do you become a new overclass. And so you see the old age homes for the people of the upper class. You know, special everything. So it was just an exaggeration of the worst parts of democracy in some respects. So, and I saw it, and that people can't, you know, the guy who doesn't own anymore, but he just is in charge of it. You know, this is his piece of property, except he doesn't own it. The state owns it, but he has control over it and all the rights, as in the old system. That was my feeling. But I wrote to them. I had my friend was still at the China Friendship Society. He transmitted my letter to the Russian government, or no, not Russian, Chinese government. And somehow they thought, oh well, he would be a good person to teach at the university. And I was, you know, as I told you, teaching the engineers about medicine. And they didn't really care about what my ideology was. They cared about the fact that I could do this job. And then when the anyway, it became very simple, but in the beginning it was very complex.
And that year in China, it somehow made you a bit more suspicious about Maoism, Marxism, Leninism? Or?
It didn't make me suspicious, it made me much stronger than that. I just think it's another means of taking over, you know, the same kind of affair as business did. The same. It didn't bring anything new. It was the old stuff. Only it's been simplified. So the manager of the factory is still the manager of the factory, only he's maybe more stupid because he really hasn't any training. And factories that were made that were completely stupid.
But I just don't see why that should lead to the rejection of Marxism as a whole. Because there are a lot of people on the left in America, for example, the guy called Paul Matic, who lived actually close to Boston for a very long time and taught there, was a very prominent Marxist who for a long time made the argument in the 60s and 70s that both the Soviet Union and China represented state capitalism, and that was a state capitalist system.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with a genuine system that would have emerged from an actual bottom-up application of Marxist diagnosis of capitalism, because they did not abolish commodity production, did not get rid from the low value. I mean, they retained many of the elements. They just transferred the ownership from the capitalist class to the state.
I use Chile as my model.
Yes.
The United Fruit Company and how it took over everything.
Sure.
and that's there's a United Fruit Company on this side, and there's a Chile one in its heyday with Allende.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other side, and at the same time, I think there's something more that needs to come at this point than either of those.
Mm-hmm.
Something that has to do with these ideas of continuity, of multiple generations, it's not the word I want, multiple, we're going to have to eat soon, multiple dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It, you know, all of these systems
Mm-hmm.
that were invented earlier had to be consistent, and you had to have the yes and the no,
Yes.
and dyadic system, basically. And if one could find writings that I could really feel had a triadic essence in them, I would be happy.
Hegel's sense of logic, which is at the heart of a lot of Marxist thought. I mean, this is where you actually see the beginning of complex logic that was beyond just the...
I think I started to read Hegel at one point, but I somehow,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
well, that's why I should do that.
Mm. No, I'm just saying that there might be more resources within that body of thought that are visible from looking at the Chinese experience, which itself, I think, has much more been shaped by various geopolitical factors. They need to resist the US, they need to maintain some coherence at home, as opposed to purely intellectual ones that, those were people who were either corrupt or they had wrong ideas about centralization and control. Because speaking about the Soviet Union, for example, I mean, it would have been hard to win the Second World War without Stalin. And if you had no Second World War, then you would have had no Soviet Union as a consistent entity. It would probably be even harder to win the Civil War that happened after the revolution without a heavily centralized state, which then kind of continued in continuity. So, if you were acting under ideal conditions with no historical forces pulling in one direction or another, who knows what model we would have come up with. Good, alright.
Most of all, we need women.
You have no idea.
Okay, let me just stop my recording.
Okay.
Okay. We did good. We almost spoke for 3 hours. So. No, 2.5. Yeah.
Only 2.5.
Yeah. But no, we recorded for 2.5 hours. We spoke before. Good. So if you want the film, I'll need to transfer it somewhere. So we should look into.
Lena, I ask you, do we have another what do you call it?
USB stick or something where I have this film with him, which I would like to
Yes,
give
we
you.
have the one that you have those books from Albert.
Will it have space for
I
another
think it
film?
has lots of space. So you can just take the one hanging off the lamp. Well, Albert had brought some books.
Yeah, I know.
Or-
Yeah.
And I bought a big USB stick. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I think it should fit. You start with that one.
Okay. Sure. No, it should be about
Yeah.
4 gigabytes that I need.
I think
so
it was
is
like
it upstairs? I can
32
just.
or 64. It's hanging off that lamp.
Yeah. Okay, I can grab it. The lamp in the room where.
Where you're sleeping.
Yeah, okay.